to reduce both water challenges or to address these challenges. In particular, I'll talk today about co-investments in water infrastructure and also water sharing agreements that would increase average supplies in the valley while boosting supplies during droughts in Southern California. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. But this idea of water partnerships is not new to California. We have reviewed a little bit the information on existing partnerships, and there are many of them in the report. You can find more, but I just wanted to highlight 3 of them. The first, it's about underground storage in the southern San Joaquin Valley. It's what it's usually called groundwater banks. Water agencies, urban agencies in Southern California, and also agencies or agricultural agencies in the Central Valley have invested in these groundwater banks, and they have been working in these agreements for several decades now. There's other type of agreements. For example, I'm highlighting here the long-term transfers of dry year water from the Yuba River. Yuba River is in the Sacramento Valley. And these transfers actually are benefiting Southern California and the San Joaquin Valley, and also are providing really important environmental water to the Delta. So this is a partnership which includes also an environmental component, which is interesting. And then there are many different trading and storage partnerships on the Colorado River Basin. This is especially kind of important for urban agencies in Southern California, which kind of partner with agricultural agencies within the state, but also with other urban agencies beyond California. Just recently this week, I think, or last week, I saw that Metropolitan is working with a partnership agreement with the Southern Nevada Water Authority, which would kind of make possible some investments in Southern California in exchange for some water. So these are existing agreements, and we are working on top of these ideas, but we are providing new insights and new ideas of potential partnerships ideas. So basically, one thing that we wanted to highlight now is why are we doing this now? And I highlighted a little bit these 2 options. There's this new window of opportunity for partnerships because of 2 things. One, because of SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, is inducing water scarcity in the San Joaquin Valley. So there's a lot of interest in expanding new supplies. And then on the other side, we have urban demands, which have been reduced, or urban areas, which have been reducing demands, but they have to work or plan for the droughts of the future. You know, especially with climate change, with more intense and severe droughts, they have to plan really well or really careful for the droughts of the future. And this idea between Southern California and the San Joaquin Valley, it's especially important because of the map that you have in the right, that it's kind of the state water project deliveries. So from the Delta, there's a lot of exports, and the 2 main partners for the Delta exports are the San Joaquin Valley and Southern California. Southern California imports more than 1 million acre feet, 1.3 million acre feet on average, and the San Joaquin Valley imports 3.2 million. Just for references, we assessed in previous reports that the overdraft in the San Joaquin Valley, it's almost 2 million acre feet of water per year. So what we can see here is that there's potential reallocation or sharing agreements between Southern California and San Joaquin Valley that could be mutually beneficial. And the state water project is the main infrastructure that would make that possible. But also the state water project connects to other regions, especially the Central Coast and the Bay Area, which are also important urban regions. So this brings us to kind of the second part of this presentation, which is about Southern California. And I just want to mention briefly here that we did a lot of work in the San Joaquin Valley in the past 4 or 5 years. Actually, at PPAC, we have published 3 reports in the San Joaquin Valley, main options and challenges in 2017, 18, and 19. I highly recommend you to take a look at our Water and the Future of the San Joaquin Valley 2019, where we looked at what's gonna happen in the valley because of SGMA and what are the main potential solutions. And one of the solutions was what the solution that motivated, or the idea that motivated this report, and it's that there are potential agreements with urban areas to kind of increase water availability in the valley. But, and getting back to this report, to be successful with this, Southern California is key. Southern California willingness to participate, it's really important. And we have to understand a little bit, the context of Southern California. And this is the goal of this part. Southern California has a very sophisticated and diverse water portfolio, but also has really important differences in challenges and needs at the local scale. It's a heterogeneous region, and I'll get back in the next slide. But we analyze in detail the water portfolio options and costs, the evolution of the demands, and the expected management challenges of this region. Just to give you a glimpse of and you are in Southern California, so you know a lot about this, but a glimpse of what's happening in Southern California. We have 3 hydrologic regions: the South Coast, which is a highly urbanized area. You see here the supplies and the demands. 80%, the demands, and this is 80% of the demands are urban demands in Southern California, in the South Coast, and the supplies are more than 50% are imported water. Then we have the South Lahontan, which is kind of less significant in water use and demands and supplies. And then the Colorado River hydrologic region, which is significantly an agricultural region and has senior water rights from the Colorado River. On this other map on the right, you see the service areas where, and you can also, the red part is the Metropolitan Water District service area. And then we have a lot of other agencies that kind of rely on imports from the State Water Project, especially in the north, or from the Colorado River, especially in the south east. So that's just to make the point that we have a really heterogeneous region with more than 200 large agencies and urban agencies, 26 wholesalers, and many small urban agencies. So we took a look at what happened in the past, and I'm just highlighting the main points, but this is one of the main motivations. And I have been saying that demands have been dropping. So what this is showing, it's in orange, you can see the actual demands, and this is for the Metropolitan Water District service area, which is actually a really, it's more than 80% of the South Coast of region. But the actual demands have been decreasing since the 2000s. This is actually supplies, but it's the same that demands in that region. Since the early 2000s have been decreasing a lot, especially during the 2012-16 drought. And what I'm highlighting here is the projection of demands for different integrated regional planning documents since 1996 to 2016. What you can see in this graph is that the projections of demands for the future have been also being revisited or reviewed downwards in each of the planning documents. And what we are expecting now, actually this year, is going to be the 2021 integrated regional planning documents and urban water management plans are going to be revisited or released. Sorry, but we did some kind of back of the envelope projection. And what you can see here is that projection looking at if we keep the 2018 per capita water use and we just adjust for population, in 2040, we will have 20% less demand than what Metropolitan expected in 2016. That what was this? And actually, this is 850,000 acre-feet of water less. If the demand per capita actually falls, which it's a plausible scenario because of the policy changes that are happening, and it falls 20% more than it was in 2018, we could have 1.6 million acre-feet less, or 35% demand expected supply reduction in 2040. So what's the point of this? The main point here is that the reductions in demands are actually lessening the pressure on supply development in Southern California. And actually the pressure on, especially during drought, during normal and wet years. We did also an analysis of costs of new infrastructure. We were looking at what has happened in the past 20 years and what are the new investments in Southern California. And we looked at the cost per acre foot of different sources of water, especially looking at public data, from the Water Bond Proposition 1 and other public funding initiatives. So what we can see here, I'm not sure if you can read I'll go over there, but we have recycling facilities here, or recycling conveyance for recycling here. So we can see that when we do investments in conveyance for recycling utility facilities, we can have kind of cheaper options than with building new facilities. Stormwater capture, this is small facilities, and this is large facilities, usually because of the economies of scale. Large facilities are cheaper. We have desalination, brackish desalination, and ocean desalination. You can see that ocean desalination is one of the most expensive options. The diamond is the median cost. And then we have conservation, indoor and outdoor conservation here. So basically what we see here is that recycling, especially conveyance, stormwater capture, and conservation are options that are, the most affordable options. But one really important point here, because remember that we are dealing with partnerships between cities and farms, what we find is that most of these options, even that some of them are kind of below the $1,000 threshold, most of these options are too expensive for farmers. Farmers are usually not willing to pay. In our San Joaquin Valley reports, we found out that in the San Joaquin Valley, most farmers won't pay more than $200 per acre foot of water. There are some farmers, especially orchards, perennials, that can pay like maybe 500, 600, and even the more valuable ones could pay $700 or $800 per acre foot of water. But this is really a minority of the farms. We obtained that, I think that 2/3 of them won't pay more than $200 or $300 per acre foot of water. So take home message from this chart is that there are several options. Some of them are more affordable, but even though most of them are still not really affordable for farmers, although some of them could be. Okay, looking at other, putting all together, this is kind of the main, the kind of the summary of our analysis of the supply portfolio and the options for Southern California, is that Southern California has been both decreasing demand and increasing or diversifying the supply portfolio. But now, and now this is to manage droughts. So just looking at the future, what we think, especially given the data we found, what will happen in Southern California? Supplies will be increasingly diverse. That means that for imports, which are actually highly vulnerable in the past 20, 30 years, there have been an increase in vulnerability, especially in the State Water Project, the Colorado River Aqueduct water, and also in the Los Angeles Aqueduct water. So Southern California is trying as much as they can to safeguard the existing supplies. Remember that imports are more than 50% of current water supplies in Southern California. Water recycling will be a major source. There's a lot of investments going on. Just recently, I think that last week, the Metropolitan Water District was putting out this idea of a big recycling plant. I think that is 160,000 acre feet of water, and with looking for partnerships with other urban agencies, even beyond California. Then stormwater capture is also on the rise. There's a lot of potential. Also, we saw there's several studies saying that climate change could lower the potential because more intense storms could means that the capacity to take advantage of these storms is, you have to do more investment, or you are lowering your yields. Seawater desalination, even that it's important for some local agencies, will remain limited, especially given the high cost. it can be some more, there might be some more developments, but it won't be a major source in Southern California. And then we have brackish desalination that has some expansion potential, especially important in places or basins where there's impaired groundwater. There are several agencies or several basins in Southern California that has low quality groundwater, and this brackish desalination can help with this. Trading, which now provides 15% of water supplies, and banking, groundwater banking, are tools that have been used a lot in Southern California, especially recently, and we think that they will keep being an important part, and some of these reports about these options. And finally, water conservation will remain an essential management tool. So this is kind of the main summary of takeaways from the supply portfolio of Southern California. And now we will go to the third part of the presentation, which is about the water partnerships. And when we talk about water partnerships, what are we talking about? And I'm going to try to be specific here on what are the partnerships the ideas that we are bringing. So we are talking about 4 ideas of partnerships. I'll go over these 4 ideas with more detail. But now, just give you a glimpse. The first idea is about co-investments, where you have a water infrastructure, a new infrastructure, and there's 2 or more partners that get to pay for it. We have unbalanced exchanges. This is the second idea. Unbalanced exchanges is an exchange of water in time, where, for example, farmers would get a larger amount of water during normal or wet years, but in exchange, they pay back with water, no, not with money, but during dry years. So what happens here is that kind of water is a currency. So you receive water, more water when it's less valuable, during normal and wet years, and you pay back when it's more valuable. Then we have mixed strategies that would combine both co-investments and unbalanced exchanges. I'll explain more about why we think that's important. And finally, there's this 4th potential partnership idea, which is about opportunities related to future urban growth. So talking about co-investments, again, this is, you have one water infrastructure and 2 or more partners pay for that. We have identified 2 options here. One option would be agencies in Southern California, or investments in Southern California in water conservation or expanding alternative water supplies. Alternative water supplies are recycling, stormwater capture, others. So farmers and urban agencies would pay for this investment in Southern California. The second option would be investments in the Central Valley, in the San Joaquin Valley, in water storage and conveyance for recharge and for storing water. So although they are feasible, and there's already a lot of some history, especially in the Central Valley, in conveyance and storage infrastructure, there are some challenges. First, as I was saying, the cost of alternative water supplies and urban options for farmers is expensive. So even that some Southern California would or might welcome some financial partners, it's not so easy because it might be expensive, although there are some options, some cheaper options. On the Central Valley part, expanding underground storage or conveyance infrastructure, it's possible, but additional recharge are limited. Most years we have done some studies of water available for recharge in San Joaquin Valley, and there's not a lot of it, although there's some. And there's also potential issues with groundwater quality. There's a lot of groundwater quality issues in the Central Valley. And when you put this water into the State Water Project, it has to meet some quality metrics, which might constrain this option. So this is kind of the takeaway from the first option. The second option is about unbalanced exchanges. And I'll walk you through this chart here because it's an explanation of what this how this can be possible, right? So in normal and wet years, we would have more state water project deliveries to the San Joaquin Valley. Valley farmers would, use these deliveries as surface diversions or would recharge some of these state water projects. In exchange, they would pump less during normal and wet years, so helping, groundwater overdraft or transition to sustainability. And Southern California agencies would get less water during these normal and wet years. In exchange, during dry years, during a drought, farmers would get less water. They would get less diversions. They would pump more water from stored water in the underground, but they have to pay back also deliveries to state water to Southern California through the state water project. So which would make Southern California more resilient during droughts. The key issue here is that we have more normal and wet years than dry years. So on overall you will have more available water in the San Joaquin Valley, but more resiliency against droughts in Southern California. So as key requirements, we should or we must increase recharge. Farmers in the Central Valley should be able to send water to Southern California during droughts, and especially important to have good accounting for these groundwater banks or groundwater basins. Even so, it's also important to highlight that some agencies that have a lot of storage might not be so interested because for them it might be cheaper to just put water in storage. But as I said in the beginning, there's a lot of heterogeneity in local conditions in Southern California, and we've heard that there's a lot of interest in this option. So the third partnership idea, it's actually a combination of the previous two ideas. And why we think that this is important? We think that this is one of the most promising options, combining both co-investments with unbalanced exchanges. So why? First, because if you only do unbalanced exchanges, which is important for some agencies, you are not actually creating new water. So there's no new water, it's just reallocation of water, temporal reallocation of water. With these mixed approaches, you could create new water with new investments, which would make Southern California agencies and their constituents more interested in this creation of new water. While at the same time, another important part is that farmers could get kind of a price break, could lower the price entry for these options in Southern California investments. And what that means is that, for example, let's think that you have an option on $1,000 or $1,500 per acre foot of recycling water in Southern California. Farmers could get a lower price, but the condition is that they don't get this water during droughts. They would only get this water during normal and wet years. So that would, again, make more water available in the San Joaquin Valley, also in Southern California, especially when it's more important, which is during droughts. And then we have the fourth type of partnership idea, which is about utilities. It's kind of, there's a lot of urban utilities that have invested or have long-term contracts in supplies that they don't need in the near term. This is quite common for example, in Colorado, in the state of Colorado, but it's also an issue in Southern California. We know agencies that are not using their full state water project allocation because they don't need it. And they don't need it now, but they prefer to have it for, to ensure, resilience over time when the population finally grows. So some of these communities, some of these urban agencies could be interested in working on these agreements and kind of transferring this water in the near term to the ag sector. So that's an option that could be a potential win-win solution for both ag and urban agencies. Okay, so that's kind of the part of the agreements. One thing that we did, and I highly recommend, there's a lot of interesting information in one of the appendices, in the technical appendix C that we did. We did a lot of work on this. And there was a lot of interest in, okay, all these things that water going to Southern California uses a lot of energy and finally emits a lot of greenhouse gas emissions because it has to be pumped through the Tehachapi's. So we did an analysis of what's the resulting energy and greenhouse gas emissions of these trading agreements. And what we found, the first thing that it's important to know is that all the major energy uses and greenhouse gas emissions are already under the California Cap and Trade program. So for example, DWR has a cap and trade account. When they pump water from the Delta, they actually have to pay for the energy and emissions in the market, in the California Cap and Trade program. So what we did here is we estimated energy and greenhouse gas emissions from urban supplies and consumption in Southern California. And we also did an energy and greenhouse gas emissions analysis for ag uses in the Central Valley. We did include not only the pumping and the water, energy, and greenhouse emissions, but also all the supply chain. It's kind of a life cycle analysis of energy emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. And what we found is that only if water going to the Central Valley, to the San Joaquin Valley, comes from conservation in Southern California, Southern Californians reducing their water use, the net difference in emissions would be significant only if this comes from water conservation. If you have to create new water sources, and this is, we have here hot water conservation and cold water conservation, then you have surface supplies, groundwater pumping, recycled water, and brackish desalination. If you have to create new water sources in Southern California, which generate also energy and greenhouse gas emissions, the net difference in greenhouse gas emissions is really not so important. And especially the financial incentive or the financial value, we obtain this as a, using the cap and trade cost per ton of CO2. The financial value of this water is really small. Only if the conservation comes from hot water, the financial value per acre foot of water is important. It's up to almost $100 per acre foot if you come from hot water. But all other options are below $10 per acre foot. And even if you substitute water from desalinated plants, if you have to build a new desalination plant, actually you're increasing energy and greenhouse gas emissions. So the financial benefits from cap and trade are possible only from hot water. And there's a final caveat here, because all of these energy emissions greenhouse gas emissions, are below the cap and trade program. There would be no net emissions decline for California unless the cap of the cap and trade is lowered. Because if you reduce emissions in one part of the market, these emissions get reallocated and other can buy this allocation. So these allowances, So this is kind of the main points on the energy and greenhouse gas emissions trade-offs also for these trading agreements. So just to wrap up, I have two more slides here. The first one is about challenges. So we have highlighted that there's a lot of interest and potential promising ideas on this, but there's also many challenges. There's especially important challenges in trading rules. Some of most of the ideas that we brought are based on the assumption that water can move kind of freely through the State Water Project and also between water agencies. But State Water Project rules limit trading and exchanges. The way to exchange and trade water and move water between agencies is quite complex and constrained. But there are some improvements underway. There's an amendment to the State Water Project contracts that could help with this. There's also place of use restrictions. Place of use are, for example, the State Water Project and the CVP, the Central Valley Project, allow to move water within their service area, more or less, in a more flexible manner that they allow beyond their service area. Beyond their service area is quite complicated. So these place of use restrictions kind of limit the way that we could enable these partnerships to, for example, to increase water recharge. And there's also legal assurances about honoring water exchanges. If you are engaged in a water exchange, you should be able to pay back. Water availability and infrastructure. This is really especially important in the Central Valley, especially during 2017 and 19, that were wet years. We realized that all the interest in water recharge might not be easy to do because there's not enough infrastructure. There's a lot of infrastructure constraints. A lot of the water available for recharge comes with in a really small amount of time and with big gulps, and taking this water is not easy. So there's constraint of that. Also, state water project deliveries and Central Valley project deliveries are really low during dry years. In 2014, for example, were really low. So if there's not enough water, these exchanges might not be easy to do. There's also other constraints like financing capacity. Irrigation districts and farms have constrained financing capacity, and it's not easy for them to look for for money for water investments. And also high transaction costs. From the review of the experiences in California, we saw that most of the partnership ideas, or most of the partnership experiences that we have now, are from really large agencies, especially metropolitan and other large agencies. That means, or kind of indicates, that lower agencies, the paperwork, permitting, and other issues are really important transaction costs to get into these partnerships. But just to finalize in a more optimistic way, we think that despite these challenges, these partnership ideas are really interesting and might help address both region needs, and as I was mentioning, the long-term sustainability problem in the San Joaquin Valley and the short-term problem in the in Southern California about drought management. There are 3 points here. First, this report was especially about local leadership. The local leadership is essential. It's although I'll go later about how the state could help, it's essential that the partners, that the local leaders kind of get out and try to find or try to achieve these ideas. And this is the first step, because it's a local thing. But of course, that the state could help a little bit with this. In the San Joaquin Valley especially, we have highlighted in several reports that there's not a good collaboration or collaborative process to infrastructure development, recharge, and storage options. There's a lot of small agencies working kind of individually. So the state could help doing some regional analysis of infrastructure, recharge, and other options. Facilitate funding arrangements, and this we saw that, for example, in Proposition 1. Proposition 1, the water storage investment program, highlighted that some private agencies could have public money if they demonstrate that there's public benefits, associated with that, and that could be interesting, an interesting idea also for these partnerships. And finally, reforms to trading and recharge rules are really important. We have to be more flexible, both in trading agreements, but also for recharge. It's kind of quite rigid now, and we have to improve that to be able to manage water more flexibly. Finally, this idea of partnerships, it's based on the idea of multi-benefit partnerships, which align with the water resiliency portfolio from the Governor Newsom. And although we have highlighted here the case of the case of Southern California and San Joaquin Valley partnerships, we think that this idea, the partnership model, could be also applied to other regions. We have a lot of urban agencies in the in the Bay Area and in the Central Coast that could be also interested in these ideas. And also, I had a call just this morning with one agency in the Central Coast, which are actually trying to look for these ideas or for this partnership potential, but also for other sectors. And I already mentioned the thing with the environment. The environment, the public benefits of some partnership options could be an important way where the state could help. We could look for another partner in terms of bringing new funding mechanisms to the table. And with that, I just would like to thank everybody for attending this presentation. Also, again, for the organizers to giving me the opportunity. And if you want any more information, you can look at our website. Also, if you have any question or any follow-up thing after the talk, feel free to send me an email. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Amor, for a very interesting presentation. We have a couple of questions that I go through, and participants, please submit your questions if you have any through the chat box or Q&A. So there are a couple of questions from Mario. There are a couple of questions from the audience. I start with the one from the audience. Is that can we attribute the drop in water demand in Southern California to the conservation efforts that has been going on for several years now? And is this true even in drought years?
Yeah. So let me. There's two different things here that we have to understand, and it's totally right. We have to separate a little bit what are investments in water efficiency and conservation over the long term, which California, especially Southern California, many agencies in California, but especially Southern California, has been doing for almost 30 years now. And actually, Metropolitan has a really good and interesting accounting. Each year, they say how much money they have invested in indoor and outdoor conservation and what are the expected savings from that.
Right.
That's improvements in water efficiency, which I would call. The second thing, which is different, it's kind of demand management strategies during droughts. That's urban conservation, especially looking at behavioral changes over the short term, but sometimes also over the long term. What we've seen during this past drought, which is quite interesting, is that a lot of the conservation that happened between the 2012-16 drought, especially in 2014 and 15, there were really significant drops in demands, like 20-25% in several agencies. And a lot of us even, were thinking about a big rebound when 2016, 17, 18. And actually this rebound didn't happen, which is surprising a little bit on the, because all this conservation, the amount of water that has been saved after that, all of this cannot be attributed to improvements in efficiency. I mean, hardcore changes in how. So there's a lot of behavioral change here, and which is interesting because in economic terms, I think it's really interesting in the exploration of the costs of that, because of course there's always a cost to the conservation campaigns, information, and many other things, but there might be it might be cheaper in some options. But getting back to being specific about your question, yes, of course that this can be attributed to the efficiency improvements, but also about the information campaigns and the drought things and some behavioral changes in that were expected for the short term, but kind of are going over the long term.
Thanks, Alvar. And have you tried to experiment some of these option approaches with some of the stakeholders or with different stakeholders in the region?
Do you mean have we looked at that?
Yes, I think have you experimented any of these options with agencies in the region or not?
Yeah, so I can tell you one of the way that we work with this. I can a little bit about the PPAC philosophy on working with these projects. Every time that we kind of do a project of this magnitude, we do a lot of engagement since the beginning of the project. Actually, we did early conversations first to try to think, okay, are these the right research questions? Should we actually start this project? And there was some interest. And then when we were doing the report and working on the analysis, we did several small workshops and also a big workshop, a large 2025 agencies in Southern California looking for feedback. And there's a lot of interest, and there's in the review of partnerships, there's already agencies that are working with this options idea. So yeah, it's not exactly new. Actually, what they are highlighting, or what we are highlighting in more of the policy question here, is that there's a lot of interest, but the policies, the rules of the State Water Project kind of limit a lot the potential, because State Water Project now only allows for 3 types of exchanges. One is long-term selling of your water right, which most agencies don't want to. The second thing, it's a short-term one-on-one, 1 year only short-term exchange, which a lot of people do, but this doesn't allow for this multi-year kind of management of hydrologic variability. And the third option is kind of selling to the DWR on the turnback pool, that it's kind of a pool where everybody can sell and buy. But this is not working really a lot. We saw the data, and there's not a lot of movement in that realm, also because there's many constraints on that.
Thank you, Alvar. And there's a question by Alma. I believe she's in either Elsinore Valley or Eastern Municipal Water District. Could the Delta Convents project possibly impact these water partnerships?
Yeah, totally. So we didn't get into the complexities of including or not including the Delta conveyance here, but the idea that you can move water in a more flexible way actually increases the potential. And actually, when we think about in a potential scenario where you have the Delta conveyance built, partnerships with Sacramento Valley agencies would be much more feasible and easy. Right now, it's quite challenging, although there's, for example, the Yuba River Accord or the Yuba River dry year exchange is a good example that these things are already happening or can happen. The dry year thing with the Yuba River is kind of an option contract. So the Delta conveyance would actually allow for more partnerships, especially with Sacramento Valley partners.
Thank you. And have you considered managed aquifer recharge program with renting the aquifer spaces in San Joaquin Valley to individual agencies in Southern California?
Sorry, can you say San Joaquin Valley?
Yes. So it's a question from Mario. So have you? I know you talked a little bit about the managed aquifer recharge, but I think he's asking, or he can ask it himself too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that I got the question. It's there's different ways that you could do this. For example, the normal way that, or the traditional historic way is that Central Valley agencies just build by their own facility, and they rent the service, right? And usually what they do is they charge, instead of money, they charge water. Actually, they charge money, they charge water in some cases. But in some cases, the ways, okay, let's do they call the exchange ratios, which is the amount of water that you put. For example, if I put 1 acre feet of water, I only have the right to extract 0.9, like 90%. In some cases, it's 0.9. Actually, this is the current water bank, which is 10%. In some cases, it's 50%. Some cases for each acre feet that you put in, you only can take half of it. So there's other options. I think that Urban Ranch is working with an agency in the Central Valley in a shared infrastructure development. So both of them are going to pay for the infrastructure, and they work out the rules. So there are different ways where you could do that, and of course, at the renting, it would be a potential option, and it could be kind of a co-investment option too.
Thank you, Alvar. And then we have a few more minutes to answer one or two more questions. I know you mentioned this a little bit in the presentation, and there might be more on the report. But what would be the incentive to participate for the agencies in Southern California in your second option when you say dry year versus the wet year? Given there is a lot of storage capacities in Southern California that made a large investment, and they most of the time they don't get the full storage even in the wet years.
Actually, this is a really good question. We had a lot of discussions about that because we had in our workshops we had people flagging that, saying if we have enough storage, we are not interested, and it's totally right. So if you have enough storage is cheaper, because if it's your own storage, right? And Metropolitan and others have invested for 30 years a lot in storage. Even though there's, that's why we highlighted the thing on the heterogeneity of Southern California. For example, the Metropolitan Service Area has some areas, some regions, especially in the northwest, Ventura and the county and northwest part of the service area, and also in the central eastern part, which don't have access to Colorado River water. So they are highly reliant on state water project water. So even that, Metropolitan is not a homogeneous thing across the service area. There's parts of the network that are highly vulnerable because they are more reliant on state water project. This is a perfect example where these agencies, because of the high vulnerability, they might be interested in that. The high vulnerability means that their supplies are much more variable over time, and they don't have access to the storage that Metropolitan has in the Lake Mead or in the groundwater banks of Southern California. They only have access to San Luis Reservoir and the groundwater banks in the Central Valley. That's why some regions, Metropolitan, some of the agencies, even within Metropolitan, can be interested. In other cases, there's local issues, some agencies, even that they are members of Metropolitan, are looking for their own way to manage their water. In some cases, they might find agreements that are more beneficial for them than others. And not all agencies have a lot of storage. We've heard also from agencies in Southern California that they don't have enough storage, and they have to look for these ways. For example, I was mentioning that some agencies in Southern California are not using their full allocation of state water project because they have the contract, the long-term contract, but they don't have water. They don't have storage to put this water on. So they have to engage in this kind of agreements to make this water valuable.
Thanks very much, Alvar. And here's the last question for you. I'm sorry, Arya, we cannot go through all of your questions, but this is a great question, and other ones too. It says 50 California counties introduce bans and limitations on moving water outside the county via water trades. This partnership is about water transfers. Can you talk a little bit about negative externalities for exporting and importing areas?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we didn't deal with this in this report. Basically, because we are assuming we are mostly focused on the state water project kind of reallocations, and all this is water already exported from the Delta, which has all the environmental impacts and others. But it's a really good question, and we actually looked a little bit in our San Joaquin Valley report. the externalities in terms of environmental impacts are addressed. There's environmental regulations which address these issues. The more interesting and challenging externalities are most, to me at least, are on the socioeconomic impacts or on a region. There's some examples with the Imperial Irrigation District and Palo Verde Irrigation District with Metropolitan, where there were mitigation actions. Metropolitan was paying for a fund to kind of reinvigorate the economic, the social economy of this region to try to avoid, the impacts of following land on jobs and other issues. I have to tell you that we haven't looked at that in detail, but what's more interesting, I don't know, maybe Ariel can say otherwise, but I haven't find any interesting, or no, sorry, interesting is the word. There's not many work out in the field looking at these impacts, and it's really interesting field because I think that there's a lot of interesting questions on how water gets reallocated and what are the socioeconomic impacts. I want also to highlight the opposite, and it's I call this kind of the danger of water protectionism, kind of, right? So what we looked in the San Joaquin Valley is that if you don't allow for trading, with Sigma, the job and revenue losses are going to be really significant. And by allowing trading within counties in the San Joaquin Valley, it's not external trading, just within the valley, you can reduce job losses and the economic costs of transition to sustainability by almost 2/3 is what we obtained. So yes, we have to look at potential externalities and impacts, especially in the socioeconomic dimensions of these trading agreements. But at the same time, we also have to look that if we don't do them, the economic consequences are really important too. Socioeconomic.
Thank you very much, Armor. It was a pleasure having you and learning more about this report. Thank you everyone for participating. Please consider participating on our March 11 seminar or webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, Alvaro. Very, very, very exciting study.
Thank you so much, Ariel, Mehdi, and everyone for attending. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.